respect to these people, because it could have been me easily this morning. It could have been me if I hadn't had a doctor's appointment today. If my schedule had been slightly different, it might have been me walking in front of here.
I couldn't believe that it was at basically our doorstep. It made me really nervous and sad to think that a lot of families have lost their loved one, or they didn't know where they were and they couldn't situate them. So I'm just glad that we're safe, but yeah, our hearts are with all of the families who lost somebody today.
And Joanna is here with us now. The police chief speaking this evening. What's the latest from him?
Well, the crime scene is still an active one, and it's a big one. It stretches out almost a kilometer down that way. And we spoke to a couple of officers on the scene. They're going to be here for at least a couple of days. And police are pleading with the public to send in anything that they have, any pieces, snippets of video, any eyewitness accounts, because they literally do want to piece this and construct this timeline as accurately as possible.
The question, of course, so many had as soon as this happened and still do tonight is motive. What do we know about that?
They're not speaking specifically about motive. They're not ruling anything out yet. But here's what the Toronto's police chief had to say about motive.
We're all putting our pieces together to see exactly what we have. And at this particular point in time, there's nothing that does affect the national security footprint. We are looking very strongly to what the exact motive or motivation was for this particular incident to take place. And at the end of the day, we will have a fulsome answer and we'll have a fulsome account as to what the conclusion of this is.
I will just say to people that I hope that they will understand, as I know they do, people who live in the city, who have come to the city from around the world. This kind of tragic incident is not representative of how we live or who we are or anything to do with life in the city on a day-to-day basis. And that I hope people will reflect on that, will reaffirm that, will go to work tomorrow and perhaps offer, as sometimes is the case in churches, a sign of peace to each other, just in some small way to acknowledge that we're going to carry on with heavy hearts, but that we're going to carry on with a life that is admired around the world, and that we will do that in the way that Torontonians do things.
People across the country are thinking about what's happening here in Toronto and are thinking about the families and the victims. So I just want to again thank everyone who has been so ready to support and to encourage anyone who has information, as the mayor and the chief have said, to come forward.
So reassuring words from Ontario's premier and Toronto's mayor, but this investigation, it will take a long time, and for sure there'll be more to hear about tomorrow.
Okay, Joanna, thank you very much. So as we've heard, officials saying there is no national security threat, at least none that they have found, but CBC News has learned more about the suspect in custody, Alek Minassian. Here's what may have motivated him. Our senior investigative correspondent, Diana Swain, has been looking into that angle. And Diana, what have you learned?
Well, as you've said, there's no indication so far that authorities have that this was motivated by terrorism or by political views. Why then? So here's what we've learned so far about the man behind the wheel and what might have motivated him to do this. This cell phone video shows the driver as he steps out of the van into the line of a police officer who has his weapon drawn. That driver has now been identified as 25-year-old Alek Minassian. Watch as he gestures, appearing to try to provoke the Toronto police officer into firing on him. And listen as he yells at the officer to shoot him. Tonight, Minassian is in custody. As police search for a motive, one possible explanation is circulating online, suggesting Minassian was angry over being rebuffed by women in what appears to be a post on Facebook, in which a man with the same name and picture as Minassian refers to the Supreme Gentleman, Elliot Rodger.
Hi, Elliot Rodger here.
In fact, Rodger was responsible for a deadly rampage in Isla Vista, California in 2014, killing 6 people and injuring over a dozen more.
Tomorrow is the day of retribution. The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity.
A video Rodger posted just beforehand raged about successive women turning down his advances.
All because girls have never been attracted to me.
In that video, men who always seemed to win with women were referred to as Chads, Stacys, the women who turned men down, rendering those like Rodger incels or involuntarily celibate. This post posting, apparently from Manassian, says, "The incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys." CBC News has not been able to independently verify the post as being made by Manassian. There is no indication so far that he targeted any specific person as he plowed down the sidewalk, but rather aimed his vehicle at anyone in his path.
So, Diana, a lot to digest there. Tell us more about what you know in this case.
There's not a whole lot more about him on social media, Ian. What we did find was his LinkedIn profile, in which it says he's a Seneca College student. That's a college here in Toronto. He appears to have been a student there for some time. It says from 2011 to present day, so we're talking 7 years. It seems he was developing an app that would help you find free parking spots in Toronto. Beyond that, based on the footage, we don't believe he was seriously injured in any way as he was taken into custody.
All right, Diana Swain, thank you.
As Diana mentioned there in her piece, a group name that you've probably never heard of before, incels or involuntary celibate. Their brand of conversation has been banned from websites like Reddit.